Hey there, and welcome to the Total Potential Podcast. I'm Cole along with Jake, and we're so grateful to have this time with you today and grateful that you're sharing some of your precious time with us. Today, we have our first conversation about the book, which is so exciting. Jake and I's first book is coming out October 12th. And it is just really, it's a resource for families to dive into all things growth and development, not only from a personal perspective, but in marriage and family. And so today we're going to start with our very first character quality that we talk about in the book. And it's a tough one.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And that is courage. So Jake, when you think of that word just by itself, like what does that mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's such a great way to start the book and the conversation on it. But I think what comes to mind for me with courage is instantly what I think about is action. We act out of a place of fear, um, maybe not being authentic to courage or using that skill, or we're so set in our purpose or what we're trying to do that we act in a courageous way. And even if we know it's going to create a little bit of friction or maybe a little bit of struggle, it's still a place of using that courage instead of running away from it and acting out of fear.
Yeah. And it's so much easier said than done, right? Like,
For sure.
one thing I think about often when I have this conversation with clients is it's one thing to feel capable of being courageous, like when life requires you to be that way. But unless you practice that in small ways regularly, like from what reservoir would you be drawing from? And I think
Yeah.
about that all the time. Like, unless you're willing to, get the reps in, I mean, okay, great. Life is going to contact you and you might have the capacity to be courage in that moment. But what about like in the next moment and in the moment after that? Because most of the time when life contacts us, it's not for one moment, right? It's something that requires long lasting, big time, like not only mental, physical, emotional energy to take that action over the course. And that doesn't just show up because
Yeah,
we in our mind thought, oh, well, I can be courageous.
for sure. It's very interesting too, because at least speaking personally, um, coming from an athletic or a team sport background, the word courage comes up all the time, right? You got to play with courage, or you got to do all these things. And what's funny to me now on the back end of my athletic career is thinking about things like when it's directed at other people, whether it be a protection type of thing, or where you really got to stand up in a big moment and do something very courageous. For some odd reason, that seems an easier action for me than to maybe have a conversation with my wife about parenting or finances or whatever, where you get this like the clammy hands and the weird stomach about some like such little trivial thing that you have the conversation, you both feel good about it and you move on. So I think that's what's really cool about courage is some of the more instinctual things that it's like, some of your preparation can just take over and out in a courageous way, as opposed to some of these smaller tasks, whether they're internal personal things or in relationships with people, where sometimes, at least for me, that's where I'll act in a very fear mindset, instead of just coming at it with, a courageous, hey, this is who I am. This is authentically what I'm trying to do with my life and how I can be of service to you and people. Sometimes that can be tricky, at least for me.
Yeah. I've been in a lot of groups where courage is referenced as like that big, powerful action. The courage of somebody who is a firefighter and runs into a burning building, or, those are like really outward, very action oriented examples of courage. But what you're saying, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that sometimes, not always, but sometimes those types of actions are easier because they require immediate action. You don't have a second to be like, I don't know, should I do the right thing here? Like there's just boom, like it has to be done.
Yeah.
But I agree that the softer, quote unquote, courageous actions, in my experience, are also a lot harder. Like I mean, this is going to sound silly, but the courage to just sometimes like say the hard thing, like you're saying in a conversation with somebody that really matters to you, or just to say the truth, that's hard. And I would argue that it's even harder to be courageous toward yourself, like not in some outward conversation or in an action you take with another person, but like, how do I tell myself what's true and brave and results oriented that moves me forward, instead of like that fear loop that just is running in the background all the time saying, I'm not enough, I'm not worthy, I'm not whatever.
Yeah.
And instead it becomes a cycle of inaction based on one thought that I haven't yet had the courage to just like look myself in the face in the mirror and just say, no,
Yeah.
that is not what love would say.
Yeah. I mean, I think now, coming from the lens that I'm looking through now, but kind of looking back at last, 7 8 years of my life since I've worked out of my athletic career, business career, it's like kind of like what you were saying, like thinking about like jumping into a cold tub, right? Like that does take courage, but that's such a simple thing, at least for me, right? Of like, you're either going to do it or you're not. So it's a very kind of black and white thing, right? Like, and it's cold. It's going to be, suck it up, right? As opposed to like my first sales job, right? It's like, oh my gosh, I got to call this company and they might say no, right? So for one of the things that I've struggled with my whole life of approval of others, or like seeking the approval of others, or that in that kind of context, like the thought of like somebody saying no to me is driving a nail through my ego, right? Now all of a sudden, that very, very simple task, there's 300 some million people in our country, and I'm worried about one guy saying no to me. I mean, it's very silly, right? But that's something where would take at least that phase of my life, right? That took way more courage than going out and running 10 miles, or thinking about doing something physically very tough, or jumping in the cold tub or whatever, right? I mean, that stuff was easy. So it's easy to be courageous in those spaces because for me personally, those were things I excelled at. So yeah, for sure, I can be super courageous there. But then in some of those other areas of my life where there might be some self-doubt, or some, not as confident as I am in maybe some of those other arenas, now all of a sudden being courageous with simpler tasks can be very, very challenging.
Yeah, no doubt. I had a really interesting conversation with our middle son about just the word courage came up. And I said, what do you think courage is? And he said, I think being brave. And, he thought of some of those like running into the burning building or serving in the military, like those kinds of things. And I said, Will, it's really interesting because the word courage, like the root word, comes from the word heart. And when I think of being courageous, I think of like, how do I love somebody all the way? How do I communicate with love? How do I sometimes those things feel really hard. And I said, do you think that takes courage? And he said, oh yeah, way more than the other kind.
Yeah.
Which is so interesting. The kid's 10. He was only 9 at the time. And even from a child's perspective, thinking about taking action oriented from love is harder to consider than, jumping from that, next highest diving board, or, whatever might be that kind of like scary thing for a kid.
Yeah.
So super interesting that like even as adults we experience that, but that's hard for our kids too.
For sure. Well, and in that context, right? Like, being a dad and being a parent, sometimes it takes a lot of courage to have patience with your kids. Maybe had a day that didn't go great at work, or whatever might have happened throughout the day. And all of a sudden, you're in your family structure, which in the context of what we're doing, right, is that's what we're hopeful is the highlight of your day. And then sometimes having to take the courage to maybe, find a little gap of time between when you come home and when you actually see your family, to do some breath work or to do a short meditation or a short gratitude practice or whatever. Right? For me as a man, instead of thinking like, I'm just going to bowl through this, right? And then you get home and you start yipping at your kids and you're, not talking with your wife with love and whatever. Just take the courage to know yourself well enough to understand, all right, things didn't go how I totally wanted them to today, but I'm going to take 10 minutes, 5 minutes just to reset, so that when I enter into my family, I have the intentionality to be super present, super focused, and super loving in that world, right? Instead of letting things just continue to snowball, just having the courage to say, hey, I'm off here personally, and I need to get right with myself before I jump into this arena with the people that I love the most.
Yeah. I think there's a really interesting opportunity to model courage in that. Like, I agree that, if you need to take the personal space to like decompress or just reconnect with like, wow, I feel off, but I have more capacity to be loving. So let me connect back to that space. I'm also imagining how really powerful it is to model like showing up as not your best with your kids. Like, there's been times where I've been just off, like maybe I got a bad night of sleep, or my to-do list got overwhelming, or whatever it is. Like, it doesn't always take some monumental thing to kind of shift our energy off. And just sometimes I'll go up to one of my kiddos and be like, you know what, things are just kind of funky for me right now. Like, could I just have a hug? Because I want to be patient, and I want to be with you, and I want to be kind to you. And I'm just kind of like having a hard time with that right now. So could we just have a hug or hold hands for a minute, or something.
Yeah.
Like, reach out to them, because I mean, we talk about this so much in the book. Like, we are modeling exactly what we want our kids to see, right? And do and become. And I'm not saying that they have to be that thing, but if we're going to, like, I think about people who, harp on their kids to never swear, but then that person drops an F-bomb like every other word. Like, what is your kid going to do with that information? It's like polar opposites, right? And so I just think what an opportunity it is to model, either letting our kids see us take those couple of deep breaths, or asking them to like participate in just like the courage it takes to ask somebody that you love for support when you're off. Like, I want my kids to know that that's possible, that they can ask for what they need.
Yeah. How about even when, man, the awesome thing about this experience is we all are human, and everybody from in some phase of their life throughout the day is going to have something that they wish they could go back quickly and do it differently. But having the ability as a parent to tell your kids or your spouse, hey, I'm genuinely very sorry. Please forgive me for not having patience or not being super present when I was with you, and showing the vulnerability of just saying, hey, I was not my best in this circumstance, and I'm very, very, very sorry. I'm trying so hard to be a great dad and a great husband. And when I do slip up, I want you to know that I'm aware of it, and that I am okay to tell you, hey, I screwed up here, but I'm growing and I'm learning from my mistakes, just as I hope you are, you know?
Yeah.
And again, that's one of those small things that when you're talking about courage can get lost sometimes, because that's something that we just breeze by in our lives because we're like, oh, these people love me, right? I don't need to say sorry to them. My kid gets it, you know, or whatever. And that's such a missed opportunity to actually show genuine courage to people that you love the most and say, no, I actually am very, very sorry. I don't want to be like that.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't want you to look at me and think that that's okay.
Yeah.
So, and what's so cool about kids, right? We've talked about this before. They will tell you if you're on
Yeah.
by how they interact with you. So if they're coming at you with pure love, and if they want to be hugging on you, and if they want to be all around you and talking with you, it's like, okay, there's probably a good frequency coming from me, showing them love, and then they give it right back in waves, right? But if you come in and you're all grumpy and that, right? It's like, all right, see you, dude. I'm gonna go play Xbox with my buddies because there's something wrong with
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know?
They don't have any problem identifying very quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even when it's unspoken, right? Like it requires no words. They just take in exactly how you are. I love the other point you made there, Jake, which is that I do think there's an opportunity not only for us to model courage, but to model being okay making mistakes. Because I think it takes a ton of courage to fail. And I like dislike that word so much. I can't even tell you. There's, to me, the only failure is if you decide you can't learn from something.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not the way it feels out in the world. And so modeling like, hey, I tried something here and it turns out it didn't work out like the way I was hoping. I'm going to ask for a redo on that. Or can we start that conversation over? Or, hey, I'm going to walk outside. I'm going to come back in. Like, I'm going to give this another go. You know, that's to me a really important aspect of modeling courage as well. Even before when you were talking about, you know, your sales position, something that's taken me a ton of courage has been to be okay collecting no's. Like, give them to me. I need practice collecting no's because not every person I talk to needs to agree with me. Not every person I talk to is going to be like lined up as far as opportunities or principles or, you know, like what's meant to happen. And that could be friends, family, business opportunities, like wherever it is. And so it takes so much courage for me to just ask, right? Because that no is possible. But like, give it to me. Let me collect your no because it gives me the practice of asking the question at all that I was afraid to ask. And I'll go and then I'll keep going. I'll keep those no's and I'll find a yes.
Yeah. And that's such an awesome example of, you know, that piece of, because I think what has really shifted for me in my mind is when you're in that mindset of, you know, there's always going to be those moments where you have that kind of pit in your stomach, like what I'm about to do scares me for some reason, right? This phone call to this person or asking this person or whatever. But where you have to have the personal courage too is if that feeling is so overwhelming that it enables you to act, then you most likely probably aren't doing what you're meant to be doing or what you're supposed to be doing, right? Because those no's, when you're very passionate and you're very purpose driven and you're others focused and all of these things where now all of a sudden the authentic self comes out very boldly. And it's like, sweet, right? So a lot of times like in that space with like what we're doing now or super passionate about, when somebody tells you no, at least for me, right? It's like what I hear is not right now in my life or not this moment, but right, you still have them on your list, you still have them, you still can pray for them and all this stuff. And who knows, that little seed that you might have planted on that one phone call where you said, hey, we're doing this really cool stuff I'd love to share with you the struggle and the triumph and this and that. And boom, boom. And they're like, hey man, sounds awesome, but not right now. It's like, well, at least I had the opportunity, the 10 seconds on that short phone call to put the thought in that person's mind that maybe 5 years, 10 years, 20 years down the road, they call you up and they're like, dude, I've been thinking about that since you told me that one, that little blurb about what you were doing or what you were striving for, or some challenge you were after and you were looking for some teammates or whatever. Now all of a sudden that no becomes very easy because you're like, I feel like I'm on the path that God put me here to do. And if I continue on that, these people are going to say yes. And the people that said no, at least the seed was planted that, hey, they know for sure what I'm doing. They always can come back to me because I'm going to be here. I'm going to keep trudging down this road and keep trying to find people to help,
Yeah.
So I think that's an internal courage piece of like, if the no's are so overwhelming, then maybe you need to take some time for yourself and realize, hey, I'm probably not doing what I was put on this earth to do.
Yeah. It's amazing how very intimately we feel that misalignment.
Mm-hmm.
And we shut off our recognition of that feeling because we've been told to our whole lives, right? And I don't mean like you and me. I mean like people are told to shut off their internal mechanisms for understanding what's right for them and what's wrong for them based on like what's expected of them. And
Yeah.
whether that's your family, your school, your sport, I mean, there's like a million ways we're conditioned for that. But the thing that I was thinking of as you were talking about that was like, your body will not lie to you. Like
Yeah.
when you feel afraid to take the right action, you will feel that in your body. Your heart rate might pick up, you might get, sweaty palms, your face might flush, like your breath might get quick. Like, oh, wow, body, thank you for sharing this piece of information with me, because now I know I need to tap into my heart center to have the courage to take action. But for most of us, we feel that sensation and we take it as a no. We take it as, oh, see, that doesn't feel good. That wasn't meant to be. And there's a big difference between getting that sensation and it's like, oh, I forgot to look both ways and cross the street, and oh, look, here comes a car. Like that sensation actually feels very different than, oh, there's this thing that's like so important to me. The next most important step for me to take is this thing. And my whole body just like I just get that feeling. It doesn't feel good. And that's when it's like, okay, interesting. So I'm a little afraid. What am I afraid of? Right? We can get super curious. What's going to happen if I do that and it lands funny or it doesn't go the way I was hoping? Like, okay, interesting. What can I learn from that? Instead of like a mechanism to shut down. But then on the flip side of that is when you're saying about like, when you get that no, you can feel what that alignment is, right? Like sometimes you get the no and there is some kind of like reciprocal, like, okay, I said no, but everything else about me conveyed something like, maybe. Versus I think you're an idiot. Why would I ever want to talk to you about that? Like, whatever. Like your body will feel totally different depending on what the real true response is. That has almost nothing to do with words, but is like what's happening inside, which is like real metaphysic. And like,
for sure.
It's a little bit outside of some people's comfort zones to think in that way. But I guess the underlying point is like, your body will not lie to you. Your body knows. And sometimes just having the courage to be like, hey, I'm super curious what my body would share with me on this. Like sometimes that's enough to have the courage to take, the next best step.
For sure. And what's cool about life is you can find things that push you to that space, right? Like I think back to when I first started doing CrossFit four and a half years ago, I used to get super, super nervous before the workouts. And after, kind of doing a lot of this self-work and the journey that I'm on now, I look back at that, and what made me nervous was the thought of, what are other people going to think based off of how I perform? Right. So I was so worried about what other people thought about me, that even something like that, where I knew physically I was going to do fine. Right. But if I don't get first in our gym at the 12 o'clock class with the 10 other people, oh my gosh, people might look at me and say, "Man, what's wrong? He didn't get first place." So it's something like that, where when I first started doing that, I was like, hey, I've just been a slug for the last handful of years. I need to start working out. Turned into something where I had to force myself to go there day after day after day after day, because I was challenging myself on a courageous standpoint of dealing with this insecurity that I have of how other people see me. And then realizing it's, oh my gosh, this is how I'm feeling about myself.
Right.
If I don't get first in this workout, you're a loser, you're a piece of shit, whatever. Right. So it gave me this awesome opportunity to just, like people say all the time with working out, right? The hardest thing to do is just driving there and actually opening the door. Yeah. Once you're in there, it's like, I'm here, I'm going to do it. So, there's so many things like that in our lives, where if there's something that you're really, really challenged with, whether it's something you've dealt with your whole life or whatever, there's always something you can find to really lean into that thing, and then get the opportunity to act out of fear or courage every single day with something that's very trivial. It's not like, going into the gym doesn't dictate that if I'm going to make a sale or make money or do whatever. But man, you leave the gym and you conquered it. And it's like, now you go into your work arena and it's like, I'm going to freaking crush this, or whatever. So we have these opportunities every single day, multiple times a day, to really, if we truly work on understanding ourselves, then we know what we have to be courageous in, for sure.
Yeah. Well, and what you're saying is,
sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, what you're saying is really important, which is that, like, there's a lot of different avenues where we can opt into something hard. And like for you, opting into a super hard physical workout probably isn't, like, from a physical standpoint, much to contend with. No. Whereas you were able to use the physical space as a way to work on your mental and emotional understanding of who you are and what's driving you, and other factors, which takes tons of courage, because you have to look every day when you show up there, I have to deal with that.
Yeah.
And it's like, how do we find those little things that flex this muscle, that like train the action, right? Like, I, as a yoga teacher, I know so many people who they will do the hardest workout imaginable. They can get themselves into crazy yoga poses, like all the things that like look lovely, but you ask that person to sit in silence and like watch out. Like, that is the most uncomfortable thing that person can imagine, because all they have is themselves and their thoughts.
Yeah.
And for some people, you don't have to be like this physical beast in order to access that. Like, there's tons of ways you can access that. You can come in, you can opt into contact with people who maybe don't believe the same things you do, right? Because that's going to take some courage to act and speak with love. And there's a million ways that you can opt into something that's uncomfortable as a way to flex the courage muscle.
Yeah. For sure. And if you have those different things that you do, then it's easier to hold yourself accountable too, of knowing, I'm going to do these things today. They're going to really push me. They're going to really challenge me, but I'm going to do them.
Yeah.
And it's just, there's all these examples you can use, but like when I first started getting into my Bible study groups that I'm in, and at that phase of my life, when I first started 4 or 5 years ago, there was times where everything would be going super great. And then I couldn't wait to go to Bible study to share all these experiences. Oh my gosh, I was crushing it with my kids. Me and my wife were dialed in. I'm working out, I'm doing all this stuff. And then there'd be a month that would go by where I wouldn't go because drinking too much or maybe getting mad a lot or did something to somebody that I wasn't super proud of. Where in a dynamic like that, you're with people that have literally they're walking the same walk you are, and they are there prepared to say to you, listen, dude, the sweet thing about our faith is ask for forgiveness and move on, right? Try. All you have to do is try.
Yeah.
So it takes courage, right? Like in a dynamic situation like that one, it's like, hey, I was off last week. I got in a fight with my wife. I was super not patient with my kids. I did something that I wasn't proud of, whatever. It takes courage to go to a group like that, right? But there's accountability to it. And then you get there, you talk about it, you express what happened, guys pray for you, right? And you get centered back into whatever you feel is right. And in that case, right, reconnecting with Jesus. Okay, thank you for holding me accountable to where I want to be going with my life. And it just took a little bit of courage to be vulnerable and say, guys, I really, really failed.
Yeah.
But I'm ready to get back on track. I want yearning so bad to do this or whatever. So at least for me personally, I put those things in my life intentionally because I know that I have to be accountable not only to myself, but then to other people that are shooting or striving for the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt. There's a million ways to practice it, and you have to opt into something, right? Like start with one. Like, both of us are lucky. We have a lot of different ways that we opt into courage regularly, but it didn't start that way, right? Like it didn't start like, guess what? I have these 5 groups that are really amazing and I show up fully there, like one thing at a time, one step at a time.
And sometimes it takes courage in those groups too, right? Really show up and be like, I am freaking destroyed right now. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's happening, but I did this, and something inside of me or whatever is not going good.
Yeah.
That takes courage to literally just break down the barrier because it's so easy when you meet somebody and they're like, how you doing? You're like, dude, I'm awesome.
Yeah.
You're like, not awesome. Things are going really crappy, Yeah. And maybe there's something you could say to me that will, I don't know. But just being vulnerable and showing people love and, especially as a guy and, being a bigger guy and whatever, you get this idea in your mind that like when a man is strong, like in your face, I'm gonna F you up, right? And then you realize what actually takes courage is maybe sitting down with one of your kids and showing them some emotion or allowing them to see you express yourself how you actually want to be expressed in the world. Like all this stuff takes emotion. That doesn't take away from the physicality of being able to protect people and, do the things that I think that you should do as in your family and stuff like that. It doesn't take away from it. It actually strengthens that.
Yeah.
But it takes a lot of courage to break those societal kind of boxes that they put you in and say, no, I actually don't fit in there at all.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's been an area that's required a ton of courage for me. Like I'm supposed to be this doctor's wife who lives this very certain existence as a mother and as a social person. And it just was like from the get-go, like so untrue for me. Like every time somebody would introduce me to a group as, oh, this is Dr. Birschbach's wife, my first thought would be, F you, my name's Nicole. Like, I don't want to be Dr. Birschbach's wife. I love him, but that's not even me. That's just like a title that you have attached meaning to. And so it's taken a lot of courage to just be like, oh, hi, I'm Nicole. Nice to meet you. And it's so simple, right? It's like such a small, tiny thing, but it would be easier for me to just be like, oh, hi, it's so nice to meet you. And and become that thing that everyone else is expecting me to be instead of just being myself. It would be way easier to do what is expected, but it would just
Yeah,
like eat away at me over time. Jake, I'd be
for
really
sure.
interested to know. I'm going to share one other example because, I think it's an important question to learn from. Like, okay, in times when I have been able to access or express great amounts of courage, like what skills can I take away from that? What lessons, what information can I bring forward? And then on the flip side, to think of, okay, well, I see this little gap where I could use some more courage, and I do need a little bit more courage there. And the first example that comes to mind in a place where I was able to access a lot of courage is in like catastrophe. Like immediately following the accident that I was in, you know, it's the middle of the night. I'm in the middle of nowhere. Like I have no idea how help is coming. And so immediately I start trying to take action, like literally not even noticing that I have broken bones. Like there's a lot of pain. Like there is nothing. It was like immediate, like, let's go. How do I fix this? What action do I need to take? How do I call for help? Like get through the things. And I would think for a lot of like outsiders looking in, that type of action takes a lot of courage, and it takes, some courage to withstand the pain and like the recovery and those things that come afterward. The interesting thing for me is like that required no effort.
Mm.
There was no conscious process for me of that, which an interesting lesson for me in that I could bring forward was to say, okay, when I just like tap into what is happening right now, like in this moment, there are no decisions to make. It's very easy for me to take action. So in times now where I feel fear or I feel like doing the right thing is challenging, that's one of the tools I use. Okay, how can I just be present to what is right here, right now, so that I can do the right thing at the right time? Or how can I, like, it turned out that I had like really solid problem solving skills in a situation like that. Even like afterward when I wasn't going back to college for a semester, okay, like what online classes can I take? What do I need to do to make sure my job's still secure when I get back to school? Like that stuff was super easy for me. Okay, so I have good problem solving skills that I can use when things are complex or when there's a lot of things to do, which, sometimes like just that task list is overwhelming enough to people that they become incapable of taking action, right? So it's like, even though that was easy for me, there are definitely some lessons to pull forward that have been like continually useful to me in my life. So is there a time in your life where it's been like easy breezy, no problem to be courageous?
Yeah, I think similar to what you said, that for me, where I've really seen just almost like subconsciously where like my courage just shows up, even not maybe having to access it, is very similar to like what you said, kind of heat of the moment, and typically involves somebody else, right?
Mm.
I think of example I have, right, of something that was an interesting experience for me is a couple winters ago. I'm driving down the highway. The lady in front of me lost control of her car, and her car ended up way up in the ditch. Right? Didn't even think about it. It's like, oh man, there's some. I'm here. I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna pull over, even though I might get ran into by the guy behind me or whatever. But it was like this instinctual, like I just have to go make sure everything was okay. I actually went up to the car when I got there, and the lady was super aggressive toward me. She's like, "Get out of here!" But I got back to my car, and I remember still feeling really no attachment to her, is because I knew that I did what instinctually for me felt right. and that scenario could have been way different. She could have been super hurt, might not have had her seatbelt on, whatever. And then even when I was playing hockey, it was super easy if something happened to a teammate, or if like I knew it very clearly defined like what my role in the team was. It was easy to act out and courage on that, right? Like we need you to be a physical shot blocking, right? Stand up for your teammate. Got it. This is easy, right? And like you said, some of that stuff, like man, if you get hit with a puck in the face or in your body, yeah, it's going to hurt a little bit. That maybe takes a little courage, but in the moment, and don't even think about it. Just get down, let the puck hit you. It's a very, very simple thing, right? So I've always had a very easy time in scenarios like that where it's others focused and it's like right here, right now. That's something that just like I said, subconsciously, there's something inside of me that just makes that. It's not even like a question in my mind. Should I do this or should I not? And a lot of times it's at your own personal safety potentially to go make sure somebody else is okay,
Yeah.
or do something for somebody else.
There is something about that, right? It's like it's super easy for me to be courageous in regards to my children.
Yeah.
Like, do not F with my kids, or like mama bear is coming for you. I will not think twice about it. And I don't mean like aggressively. I just mean like I will stand for what is right and take whatever action is necessary to make sure that, there's no harm being done in an unnecessary way. So I agree.
Yeah.
There is something about that toward others where there is almost like an instinctual quality to being able to act with courage.
Yeah, for sure.
What about, so when I think about like an area where I could use some more courage, it's an area that I've been working on for a long time, but it continues to sort of like reveal itself in layers. And it's kind of like what we were talking about before. The area where I need the most courage is toward myself, like toward my internal dialogue of like what is possible. Because I truly believe that for like any person, everything we will ever need to do everything we have ever wanted or ever will want to do already lives inside of us.
For sure.
We just have to be willing to do the work and like do the carving, get to that masterpiece that's underneath.
Yeah.
But for me, the hardest part hasn't been like a willingness to do the work. Like that part's actually really easy for me, but more of like a willingness to like just be loving toward myself instead of always looking for the place where I fell down.
Yeah.
Real easy for me to find the places that I've taken a misstep or not have regret, but just wished like my own actions had maybe produced different results. That's been an ongoing, like, how can I be less judgmental, more loving, more curious, more all of those things that they just take love. They do, period. And thinking about that toward ourselves can be kind of challenging sometimes. But that's still, that's been a work in progress. But that's still the area that I need the most courage right now.
For sure. Very sure for me, I think that, the biggest thing, and I mentioned it earlier, but the kind of the glaring obstacle I've had in my life, my entire life is really like seeking this like external approval, and really what that's caused for me in my life is, I might be this version of Jake for this person, this version of Jake for that one, and right? So that all of these people think that I'm exactly what they need me to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I've struggled with it my whole life. And, the cool thing now is just knowing it's there and knowing that there's going to be something every single day that challenge that insecurity inside of me for sure, right? And there's days where I knock it out of the water and I just crush all of them. I'm like, no, this is how I'm doing it. This is what I'm going to do. I know I have to stay on this course. There's other days where it totally fall apart. And I think what it all goes back to is, I can, my default for myself is I'll start to tell myself these little lies, right? Like that person is right. Like maybe I am an asshole, or this person was, I am that, or, then I'll let these things kind of fester inside of me. And then I have all of these little default things. Like I my tasks done. I won't show up in my family. I won't get after my job with reckless abandon. Because that to me is like comfort area zone, right? Of like, I'm in this little world by myself. Nobody can judge me because I'm not exposing myself at all anywhere, and that's something that like I said, I've struggled with my whole life. It's a very weird thing, I think. And a lot of people that have interacted with me, like, oh, you were a professional athlete and you were this and that. But it doesn't matter. Like when I get praise from people, a lot of times it just kind of brushes right by. I don't hear it. But then if somebody says something to me that challenges that insecurity, it's just like crushing, devastating. And it all circles back to myself not being courageous in personal truth. No, this is who I am. This is what I stand for. This is what why God put me here. Right? And letting all this other stuff, because at the end of the day, everybody's got their own stuff and we're all connected to each other, and we're all kind of pushing and pulling and grabbing energy and taking energy and giving it and whatever. So I'd be kidding myself if I didn't think that there was going to be something throughout the course of the day that was going to challenge that insecurity, right?
Yeah.
So that for me, for surely, has been the hardest thing to act on courageously, and I still fall miserably sometimes. But I think the biggest thing that's helped me is having awareness of it, and now I actually catch myself having like that witnessing mind of like, you're literally lying to yourself. You actually didn't do a good job. You actually did not work that hard there because you were worried about this or doing that. Whatever. Like don't lie to yourself. You actually did well.
Yeah.
Because you didn't allow yourself to do well. You were so worried about, and I'm talking personally here. Like
yeah.
You're so worried about what was going to say, or you're so worried about what was going to happen here, or what a parent was going to say to a kid you coach, or blah blah blah, whatever. And it's like that to me can be crippling. It takes a lot of courage to be vulnerable, to say, hey, yeah, I can be very insecure at times.
Yeah. I would argue that anything that's different than that is a lie.
Yeah.
Right? It's like there's no such thing as the person who, like, every single action they take, they're like, yes, I was perfect there. And if that was the experience, you would be missing all the lessons, right? Like, I feel like it's, a lack of courage is debilitating because it prevents you from taking action that's meaningful. But like that vulnerability piece of like just what is true, I think that takes the most courage of all for anyone, like to just say like that is what's true.
Yeah.
And yet that's where all of the growth can come from, because like what you said, the awareness alone is enough to begin to take action. And so if we could just stop lying to ourselves about what any particular interaction means, or what any particular like self-doubt means, like if we could just like say the truth about it, have the courage to say the truth, then everything's possible because it's right there. It's not hiding anymore. It's just sitting there waiting for you.
Well, like you said, all of the potential is in us. It's not something we need to go seek, and it's in there. It's more about letting it explode and just live its full potential. A perfect example, in the context of what we're talking about is what how I used to talk with my wife if we were fighting or if something was going on, is I would say, "You're like, I just can't live. I can't be like my best self when you and I are off, or if something's wrong." Basically, what I was saying to her is, I'm effed up right now, and I'm just going to viewing on you and making this argument about what we're going to have for dinner. I'm just going to let it fester into this, like, man, we got this massive problem and everything, because I'm just literally projecting and spewing out all of my insecurities and everything on you. Where now, when I have a thought like that, all that it takes is just a little internal conversation of understanding the thought and then realizing, well, but I need to show up for her with my best effort. I don't need her to do anything. She needs to do what she needs to do for herself, so that when we do interact with each other, it's this interaction of the effort of trying to be our best self possible.
Yeah.
So instead of looking looking for her to make me happy, it's like, no, she does make me super happy, but I can bring a better version of myself into this interaction, which is just going to continue, so that we're running, if we're running down this railroad with each other with the same goal in mind, I'm letting the team down if I'm looking for her to make me happy.
Yeah.
And I think that was just a massive shift for me, like a thought like that of like, man, what a weak comment to make to the person you love the most of, can you please make me happy? It's crazy. It's like, no, figure out your own crap, dude. Bring your best version of yourself into that relationship, so that she can do the same. And now you can have this relationship that who knows what the possibility is,
And everything's possible. Yeah.
Yeah.
We've started this because, I think it's really hard to just look in the mirror, right? But if you consider that, like, everything in life is mirroring what you're putting out, right? And so the good, the hard, the challenging, like, all it's doing is showing you an outward representation of what's inside. And I don't mean like mirror in an exact image, but a mirror in an element of that image. So for the last like several months, our thing has been like, oh, that I see that made you upset. Like, I wonder what that's trying to show you. Because, I mean, the only reason it's a trigger is because it's something that bothers you inside, right? Like, there's no such thing as something, like, people have the weirdest quirks, right? Like, every person of every background all around the world, like, we're all these really unique individuals. But like, there's certain qualities, right, that can like really push your buttons. And it's like, oh, well, if I just had the courage to flip that and say, wow, that super pushed my button, I wonder what that's trying to show me. But it's way easier. It's like so much easier to just say like, whoa, what is up with that person? I'm nothing like that. Like, it's so much easier to just have it be something outside. But if it wasn't something in you, it wouldn't touch you. It would be like a non-issue. It would not influence you at all. And so that, in that marriage relationship, it's like, let's just be honest. Like, when you do that thing, or you say that thing, or have this pattern or behavior, like, wow, can I just get like way more curious, like, what is happening for me in that? Because clearly there's something there that I need to learn or grow from or whatever, so that I can show up all the way and not have this weird thing that you leave the cupboard doors open like bother me. Like, it's just a door.
For sure. And all these interactions you have throughout the day, I mean, like, I think what's so cool for me as I continue on this journey that I'm on is all these little sayings that have been around since I've been on this planet, misery loves company and all this stuff. When you really think about them, they're there for a reason. They've made it the length of time for a reason, because it takes a lot of courage if you're with a buddy you haven't seen for a long time, and all of a sudden you're in this toxic relationship of just spewing about wife and kids and this and that. It takes courage to say, hey man, like, let's take a pause here, right? This is negative. This is just not working for me. That person might be like, screw you, you're not my friend. You're like, okay, that's fine, but I'm not going to allow myself to get into these patterns of like just doing the easy thing because I'm in this scenario and I got to make this person feel good. I'm going to start spewing all my garbage on them. It's like every single interaction with every person is that mirror image. Like, if you're just regurgitating all this crap, you're providing them no value. You're making your life worse, and you're acting out of fear big time.
Yeah.
It's like, just, if you can just do that and just be like, no, this is the path that I'm on, and I'm striving for something big I think I might ever be able to accomplish. But every interaction and every second of every day matters, and I'm going to go at every minute of every day. It's the last goddamn minute I have on the face of this earth. And then it's like, holy crap, that's something that compounding tide day after day after day, things are going to work out well. You'll attract people into your world that are also doing that, and you planted the seed in that person's head that maybe they come back someday and they're like, hey dude, I really thought about the conversation and I thought you were a total loser at the time, but now it's like, I get it, I understand,
Yeah.
And you have to be consistent in that courage.
Yeah. And the courage that it takes to just be okay, right? Like, for that interaction to happen in that way, like, the truth is the truth. And I don't mean like projecting your opinion. I mean, just like, man, if that's the truth, it's the truth. And if that means the end of a relationship or a change in the dynamic or whatever it is, at least it's the truth. It's real, and not just some fabricated something or other, It takes courage everywhere, right? It takes courage inside of ourselves, in our family relationships, in our marriage, with our children, and into our friends, with our coworkers. Like, yeah, but the more we opt into that, right? It's like, then there becomes more and more that exponential, like you're talking about, more and more opportunity for what's true for us to become a reality, because then we're aligned, we're taking the right action, we're surrounding ourselves with the right people. We have that internal dialogue and mindset that is directional, and it changes everything.
Yeah.
Every possible thing.
And what I would say too, to wrap up my thought is that like anything else, it has to start internally. You can't be seeking your happiness or your success or whatever you're aiming for, and you can't think that somebody else is going to do it for you. So, context of courage, do a full assessment of your life, the thoughts that you have. Take 10 minutes every day and just literally sit in silence and listen to your mind, and write it down. And I talk to myself really, really bad. I'm going to take courage and I'm going to start with one phrases or one of those things, and I'm going to knock it out, then I'll work on the next one, then I'll work on the next one, and then you can go into all the different areas, your family, your business, whatever. And you can really start to say like, I need to lean into courage here. What I do for work, I actually hate.
Yeah.
I need to pivot here. I need to do something else. That might take, that I don't make any money for a little while. I got to figure it out, or I got to do whatever, but you have to look at it from an internal perspective first. Where am I being super courageous? Where do I have no problem doing that? Awesome. Continue to work on that, or continue to do that. And then the things where you're really falling short, it's like, lean into that stuff. Like you don't have another second to be courageous there.
Yeah, no doubt.
And then with, like you've been saying, like then just be super truthful about it, you know? And I am super insecure, or I am this, or I am that. Why? Well, okay, I can start thinking through it now. I can seek help if I need it. I can, get a coach. I can do whatever. There's so many different things that you can do. If you don't look at it from an internal perspective first, everything is going to fall short.
Yeah. Well,
and I'm saying that from personal. I've had coaches and I've done all this stuff, but I was looking for them to make my problems go away.
Yeah.
No?
Well, and then the challenge is that if you don't start with that internal process, your external experience of courage is still then driven by fear. So you end up taking like really bold action, but it's often misaligned and not true for you. And so then it's like the cycle isn't getting better, it's actually getting worse, right? And so absolutely, like the only place to start is in yourself. And then once you can just have that curiosity and like, what does it feel like to be courageous and what skills do I have around courage? Then it's like, okay, well, what's the courageous conversation I've been needing to have with my spouse? Like, what do I hope to obtain from that conversation? What am I afraid of in having that conversation, right? Like then we can take it into a space because it comes from love instead of still coming from fear. And so that's, a really important distinction when it comes to courage. Like I would argue everything has to start inside, but this is one for sure where if it doesn't start inside, actually what happens out in the world is still really toxic.
Yeah. And once you get that figured out for yourself, then you can go and be of service to people when somebody says something to you that they're struggling with. If that is something that you have struggled with or are, on the path to really working on or fixing, then you can help them. And if it's not, then you can be courageous and tell them, hey, actually, I have no idea what you're talking about. I've never experienced that in my life. Somebody else has, or I know this guy that has done that or been through that, whether it's, a marriage thing or a parenting thing or a substance abuse issue or whatever. I mean, you can help people through it after you figure out that courageous piece of internal yourself. So, and at the end of the day, that's what we're all here to do. We're here to be our best version of ourselves, so then we can go out into the world and help other people or be of service to other people or others focused. But you can't, at least personally, I'm going to speak for it, but I think it's true across the board. You can't do that. You're super, super and telling yourself the truth about your own personal stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's for sure. Absolutely true.
And then just act. Then just go out and act. Just make a decision and do it.
And do the right thing, no doubt. Yeah, it all lines up and it becomes much easier when it is coming from a internal true place for sure.
For sure.
All right, that's courage in a nutshell. There's so many layers to all of these things, but thank you for your time, Jake, and expressing your truth and vulnerability. And we'll keep the conversation rolling next time.
For sure.
All right. Have a great day. Thanks, everybody.
You too.